Hi everyone, my name is Wami Ogunbi and I am the author of the Zone Chronicles. I wrote Naga Ceyon when I was 16, a sophomore in high school, and I somehow finally managed to muster up enough courage to publish it my senior year. So Naga Ceyon is about a young girl named Antoinette who's on the path to become a warrior. She's determined to follow in the footsteps of her parents, who both played a very major role in founding this organization that's called Sekai. See, there are two worlds mentioned in the novel. Earth, which of course we all know about because we are living on it today, and a place called Zone, which stands for Zumiki, Orali, Numalai, and Erison, 4 allied nations. Now obviously there's a lot more to be learned about the significance of the zone, but to find out more details you're just going to have to read the novels because I don't want to give too much away. The excerpt that I'm about to read is the part where Antoinette and her mother, Mrs. Jones, are trying to flee away from something, though they don't quite know what it is yet. But whatever it is, it's causing a huge storm to rage on outside, and Antoinette is absolutely terrified of storms. So, Mrs. Jones must figure out a way to calm her daughter and get her to safety. Let's find out how she does that. Antoinette, snap out of it! Mrs. Jones' voice rose. Antoinette seemed to finally grasp the precariousness of the situation and began to run with her mom out of the living room and into another part of the house. She caught a glimpse out a window as her mother dragged her away, and what she saw was total chaos. Her favorite oak tree in the front yard that she had climbed hundreds of times in the past had toppled over. The vegetable garden just outside the living room window was long gone. In its place was an unsightly mud puddle. The shrubs that lined the front entrance were ripped from the roots and joined the other debris that was swirling wildly around in what looked like a tornado, forming in the place where the oak tree had fallen. "What's going on?" Antoinette asked, recovering her voice. This was no ordinary storm. Such powerful weather usually does not just pop out of nowhere without warning. No siren had sounded, not even now. "He's coming," Mrs. Jones announced bitterly. "Come on, we have to hurry." Mother and daughter reached the entrance of the basement and began their descent into the darkness. At the bottom of the steps, Mrs. Jones tried to switch, but as she expected, no light came on. Another loud crack of thunder roared from outside, and Antoinette began to tremble. She had always been very afraid of storms. When she was little, she would often crawl into bed with her parents and cling to them for dear life whenever one passed by. Even as she grew older, she would often find herself crawling into her mom's bed, covering her ears with her hands and shutting her eyes as tight as she could while seeking the comfort of her mother's presence. Antoinette fell to the ground, bringing her knees to her chest and burying her face between them. Her eyes clamped shut, and she pressed her hands against her ears. "Be strong," Mrs. Jones said boldly as she grabbed Antoinette's arm and raised her daughter to her feet. "I know you're afraid, but you must overcome your fear." "I won't be able to stay with you during this storm." Antoinette's eyes grew wide with fear. It was a bad time to say such a thing, but Mrs. Jones had little choice. She knew what damage could be done when he eventually did come, and she could not risk having both her and her daughter fall victim to his attack. "Mom? What are you talking about?" Antoinette asked in a trembling voice. "We're going to enter the zone, right?" Tears began to leak from her eyes. "Together." Mrs. Jones shook her head and pulled her daughter in for a hug. "I'll be right behind you, dear. I'm just going to buy you some time." Another clap of thunder sounded, causing Antoinette to flinch. She felt as alone as she did when her father died. "Please, Mom," Antoinette pleaded. This was all happening way too fast. Just a few hours ago, she was at school, upset, but at least she was among friends. "I can't lose you too. I don't want to be alone." "Antoinette," Mrs. Jones said firmly, "how many times do I have to tell you? You're never alone." "You keep saying that, but we both know it's not true. A child who loses both of her parents is alone, and saying otherwise does not change anything." Mrs. Jones pulled Antoinette into another tight embrace. She felt guilty for having to let Antoinette enter the zone alone, but there were no other options. She had a promise to keep, to herself and to Iman Jones. She must protect their daughter. Feeling her daughter tremble in her arms, she felt at a loss. It was Iman's will for Antoinette to complete the riddle when she was old enough, but Mrs. Jones knew that Antoinette would not dare go without her mother, especially at a time like this. Without thinking, she began to sing an old lullaby that her own mother had sung to her many times when she was a child. Whenever she felt afraid or lonely, her mother always calmed her with its empowering words. I walked through the valley all alone. I sought for a path to take me back home. I cried when the darkness came. The light was the only comfort from pain. Antoinette turned to her mother's soothing voice. Though tears still ran down her cheeks, she began to relax in her mother's warm embrace. Despite the obvious danger they were in, Mrs. Jones sang on, for there was a time for everything, and this was a time to be strong. She had to calm her daughter, so she did so in the only way that she knew how. Still I walked, bold and brave, treaded on to be saved. Lightning and thunder rose from the clouds, blinding and yelling, knowing my doubt. The storm outside seemed to lower in volume as Mrs. Jones' voice grew louder with power. Darkness had finally conquered the light. The mighty sun had hid in fright. But then a wind came and the clouds ran away. The sun came out, night was now day. The lightning ceased and the thunder was muted. The world stopped spinning to hear the next lines. It was I that shouted away the dark. I said the words that became a spark. I yelled at the clouds to be gone, because I'm not afraid, Naga Ceyon. Never alone, Antoinette whispered the translation. Yes, Antoinette, and you must never forget those words. Ever. I hope that you enjoyed that little piece of Naga Ceyon, and I also hope that it encouraged you to want to purchase a copy of your own. To get your copy, please visit my website at www.wamiogumbi.com. Thank you.